The impact of the young population on government policies in the MENA. The age groups 0 to 24 and 24 to 64 account for approximately 95% of the total population in the MENA today. Therefore, high levels of the current young population still require particular policy attention by using specific instruments for them. The young population should be directed to the production sector to maintain economic diversification in the economy. In order to achieve this goal, they need to be prepared for the needs of the private sector. The demographic dividend is a crucial opportunity for their economies if they can develop policies towards the economic inclusion of the young population. In doing so, they should pay more attention to investing in innovative projects, such as STEM subject skills, for the young generation. Hence, the young generation would be able to prepare for real market demands. The young population in the 21st century is the largest, most highly educated, and most urbanized generation in Arab history. Currently, approximately half of the population is under 24, and almost 60% of the population is under 30 years old. However, the large young population comes with some obstacles in developing countries. In such countries, the young population, which cannot be directed to the production sector through capacity-generating educational and employment programs, would cause social and economic conflicts in the economy. Higher education levels help to increase social and economic inclusion among the young population and prevent them from participating in unlawful activities. The relationship between the levels of oil prices and government debt in the MENA. In terms of the resource versus labor-based economic classifications, levels of government debt are so diverse. Accordingly, resource-rich labor-abundant, Iran, Iraq, and Algeria, and resource-poor labor-developing countries, Israel, tend to have no significant problems with government debt in 2017. Government debt indicators are highly correlated with oil revenues and political conflicts, especially for the resource-rich labor-poor GCC countries. GDP/debt ratio tends to increase when oil prices decrease. For instance, it was higher during the 1990s when oil prices were low, yet the ratio significantly decreased in the 2000s when oil prices increased. This ratio was below 40% in the 2000s across the region except for Bahrain, which had 62% of debt ratio in 2015. The economic dependency on oil revenues weakens the economies in the region against external shocks and leads more public debt. Many cases show the considerable increases in public debt when highly oil-dependent countries face a political crisis such as the Gulf War in 1991 and Libyan civil war. Gulf countries tend to borrow more extensively for their defense expenditures under such conflicts. Their debt levels had returned to normal when oil prices increased. However, debt ratios are set to rise again as the recent oil price shocks have caused considerable decreases in oil prices since 2014. The impact of globalization on economic growth in the MENA. In order to obtain stable economic growth, adopting globalization would be a great contributor to the MENA region. Globalization has shaped the global economy in recent decades. Its use in economic development would give more importance to the stability of MENA region countries. Therefore, they should give more attention and find ways to use globalization to their good. In the meantime, regions' contributions to globalization would accelerate the global economy. On the other hand, the globalization process caused a significant decrease in the effect of national governments on their economies. Internalization of financial markets, ease of the mobility of capital along with technological developments, the emergence of international institutions such as World Bank, WB, the International Monetary Fund, the European Union and the European Central Bank are the primary tools to direct this decrease in the influence of national governments across the world. In the meantime, after globalization phenomena, national government policies are mainly shaped by market-driven perspectives in the MENA region. Hence, under the new global economic system, policymakers tend to manage their national politics under the rules of transnational market conditions. The main elements of the Saudi Vision 2030. The main objective of this project is to reduce the country's dependence on oil. In this sense, a roadmap covering both economic and social areas and aiming for change by 2030 has been prepared. The main elements of the plan are the public offering of a part of Aramco as a state-owned oil company, the restructuring of the public investment fund with the revenue generated from the public offering, making Aramco as the most significant investment fund in the world with an estimated value of $3 trillion, and the diversification of revenues through investments in non-oil sectors. With this reform package, the country's unemployment level, which was 11.6%, was reduced to 7%, the contribution of small businesses to GNP growth from 20% to 30%, the ongoing infrastructure and development projects were not stopped, and it aimed to increase the contribution of the private sector to the economy from 40% to 60%. Meanwhile, as the social dimension of the reform package, many amendments were made to the laws in line with international human rights standards to put an end to the restrictions applied to Saudi women. At this point, issues such as legal and criminal proceedings and the working system were handled, and various arrangements were made. Examples include increasing the contribution of Saudi women to the workforce from 22% to 30% and removing the ban on women's driving in the country. Moreover, social and economic reforms that resemble European Union standards continue to be implemented in the traditionalist kingdom. Effects of rentierism on the economic diversification in the MENA. MENA countries, especially natural resource-rich oil exporter countries' economies, are mainly dependent on revenues from their natural resources. However, it is essential to note that rentierism and natural resource dependency are not the same, but they are highly correlated with each other. The share of hydrocarbon exports as the percentage of GDP is used to measure the natural resource dependency. On the other hand, the percentage of rents in government revenues indicator is used to measure the level of rentierism. Rentierism harms the economy by preventing governments from increasing the diversification in the economy. In the meantime, it harms the democratization in the country in several ways. Since rentier economies do not need to collect taxes from their society, this would break the connection between governments and societies. Lack of such a connection reduces the accountability of the state. Therefore, it should be noted here that the willingness of people to pay taxes determines the transparency level of the state. Additionally, substantial natural resources which come with autonomy in decision-making reshape the class structure of the society. This will, in turn, increase the income inequality in the economy. The most critical components that emerged with globalization. The most critical components that emerged with globalization are the empowerment of the free market ideology along with neoliberal economic policies, technological developments in communication and transportation, higher volumes in trade and cultural exchanges, and high social and cultural inclusions. Globalization is a tool to merge different cultural values and economic systems. The scope of globalization is to reach across different cultural, social, economic, and political boundaries and to merge the specific ways of thinking. It provides a combination of extraordinary technological innovation with socio-economic progress. Hence, globalization became a trigger factor in interconnecting the entire world. The role of the GCC countries in the global integration of the MENA. The GCC became a trade and labor hub in the MENA region. It has developed a well-established free trade connection in goods and services, as well as a vast amount of cross-national labor and capital mobility across the MENA region. In the meantime, because of the vast amount of oil and gas trade, the GCC countries are much more integrated with the global markets than with the MENA region. The most significant integration indicator amongst the MENA region countries is in the labor markets. Hence, foreign direct investment, FDI, flows from the GCC countries to the rest of the MENA countries play a key role. Meanwhile, some of the resource-poor and labor-abundant low-income countries became highly dependent on remittances from a vast number of foreign workers in the Gulf countries. Despite the effects of the recent turmoil in the global markets, the GCC's demographic and energy advantages with a range of ongoing significant investments would help them to strengthen their economic growth over the next decades. However, because of the nature of the pandemic, the countries that are dependent on foreign workers in the region might face cuts in foreign workers' outflow, which in return causes damage in the production chain. The process of the fight against the pandemic will determine the extent of such outcomes soon. The social aspects of the Saudi Vision 2030. As the social dimension of the reform package, many amendments were made to the laws in line with international human rights standards to put an end to the restrictions applied to Saudi women. At this point, issues such as legal and criminal proceedings and working systems were handled, and various arrangements were made. Examples include increasing the contribution of Saudi women to the workforce from 22% to 30% and removing the ban on women's driving in the country. Furthermore, social and economic reforms that resemble European Union standards continue to be implemented in the traditionalist kingdom. Moreover, it is planned to implement a green card application, which can be enjoyed by Saudis living abroad and Muslims living in the kingdom for a long time. Resource-poor labor-abundant countries, RPLA, Egypt, Morocco, Jordan. Resource-rich labor-abundant countries, RRLA, Algeria, Syria, Iraq, Iran. Resource-rich labor-poor countries, RRLP, GCC countries, Libya. The recent economic weaknesses of the MENA region. Lack of economic diversification. Political instability. Corruption. Youth unemployment. Rentier-ism and natural resource dependency are not the same but are highly correlated with each other. The share of hydrocarbon exports as the percentage of GDP is used to measure the degree of natural resource dependency. The percentage of rents in government revenues indicator is used to measure the level of rentier-ism. Rentier-ism harms the economy by preventing governments from increasing diversification in the economy. The main drivers of rapid economic growth in the recent globalization era. Increasing trend of global goods trade. Increasing trend of global services trade. Technological developments. Favorable global political conditions. The single fact that negatively affects the decision-making process of economic reform strategies such as privatization in the MENA countries. The dependency of sharing hydrocarbon wealth in public sector structures. The GCC countries in terms of global and regional integration phenomena. The GCC countries are the best example of sub-regional integration in the MENA region. The GCC became a trade and labor hub in the MENA region. It makes it easier for global and regional integration. It has developed a well-established free trade connection in goods and services, as well as a vast amount of cross-national labor and capital mobility across the MENA region. Because of the vast amount of natural resources, the GCC countries are much more integrated with the global markets than with the MENA region. The most essential components that were emerged with globalization. Free market ideology along with neoliberal economic policies. Technological developments in communication and transportation. Higher volumes in trade and cultural exchanges. High social and cultural inclusions. After globalization phenomena, national government policies are mainly shaped by market-driven perspectives in the MENA region. The social dimensions of the Saudi Vision 2030. Increasing the contribution of Saudi women to the workforce. Removing the ban on women's driving. Implementation of green card applications. Social and economic reforms that resemble European Union standards. The Saudi Vision 2030. The main objective of this project is to reduce the country's dependence on oil. The main elements of the plan are the public offering of a part of Aramco as a state-owned oil company and the restructuring of the public investment fund with the revenue generated from the public offering. As the social dimension of the reform package, many amendments were made to the laws in line with international human rights standards to put an end to the restrictions applied to Saudi women. Vision 2030 is an extended reform pact to express the kingdom's new long-term aims and expectations. It aims to strengthen the country's capabilities and to guide its new aspect of development strategy. Political economy. Since the economy as social science studies the optimal use and share of a scarce resource, political economy deals with the scope of the decision-making process of such shares. It concerns how economic choices in a country are affected by politics. Economic diversification can be defined as the shift toward a more varied structure of domestic production and trade with a view to increasing productivity, creating jobs, and providing the base for sustained poverty-reducing growth. Rentier state theory is used to describe a state substantially depending on externally generated rents for their economy. Rents come from abroad and accrue to the government directly, and only a few are engaged in the generation of this rent, wealth, the majority being only involved in the distribution or utilization of it. High young population density can be considered as an advantage for the economies of the region as they would direct them into the production chain, yet the potential political conflicts drive them into radicalism in the region. Globalization is a label that is presently in vogue to account for peoples, activities, norms, ideas, goods, services, and currencies that are decreasingly confined to a particular geographic space and its local and established practices. Free market ideology. The free market is an economic system based on supply and demand with little or no government control. It is a summary description of all voluntary exchanges that take place in a given economic environment. Free markets are characterized by a spontaneous and decentralized order of arrangements through which individuals make economic decisions. General government fiscal balance. The fiscal balance is the difference between general government revenues and expenditures, showing how much in a given year government spending is financed by the revenues collected. A surplus occurs if, in a given year, the government collects more revenues than it spends. Conversely, when the government spends more than it receives in revenues, there is a deficit.